Racism is violent, whether it is systemic or explicit, because it shortens the lifespans and health spans of those who experience it. Earlier this year, a paper was published, Cumulative Stress, Inflammation, and Racial Disparities. And since its publication a few weeks ago, it has gained so much traction online because many people are expressing the same sentiment that the paper is just confirming what we have already known about the Black American experience. We all know that we've been pretty desensitized to these heinous and straight up evil acts that are being committed against people globally. And I didn't really sit with what that meant for me until this week in my studies for, this series, because I know, number one, it really made me have a heightened sense of my own mortality in a way that just was not healthy, especially in college. I used to get straight up night terrors, wouldn't be able to sleep, panic attacks, because I just knew that I could die in this world in a way that was so violent and so preventable because of racism. That's a heavy weight to understand as a Black person growing up in this world, and that is something that I know a lot of people relate to. And so I just this week started reflecting on what that meant for me as an individual, and I also started paying attention to other people in my life and like that I'm connected to, and the ways that we go about talking about what we see or not talking about what we see or experience. And I've really been just seeing how this understanding that we can die in such violent ways can really inhibit the way that we live our lives. And I think why a lot of people are so stuck in not wanting to step outside of the bounds of what we're used to in an effort to make really impactful change is the fact that we're not very far removed from generations that we're seeing lynchings, or from generations that were having their homes burned. And a lot of us have had conversations with our elders who have experienced these things, or we ourselves have seen violence in different ways. If you grew up in a place seeing violence or understanding what could happen in different places. I say that to say, I think a lot of us are really fearful of death, to be honest, which is completely understandable because of the ways that we've seen it happen in our communities and to our people. My topic for this week has been exploring the collective bereavement that persists in Black communities, whether we acknowledge it or not, so long as we watch ourselves die to violence perpetuated through racism. That is the topic. My foundational idea this week has just been, how can I commit to building a life where I can live and die well in this world? And how can I commit to building that life for others as well? These are my directing questions for this week. Number one, how do we reconcile the loss of bodily function in a world where we have been ascribed to product and labor status? So when I was thinking about grief, it wasn't just in the capacity of, a life passing, but also as we age, we lose different bodily functions. We experience different things. We lose our youthfulness and things like that. And as someone who wants to go into medicine, I pay a lot of attention to caregiver stories and the stories of people that, are going through these things in aging processes. So I've really just been thinking, maybe our idea of grief and how we grieve, we can start by implementing it at a smaller level and how we think about just aging overall and how we see aging in this world. The second question was, what effect has seeing our deaths reflected across Black bodies had on our approach to life? And the final question was, how has caregiving influenced our element of death? So yes, let's get into the media that I visited this week to explore this topic. And Diane Dixie is a journal article published by David Roediger in 1981. What Happens When We Properly Grieve Our Bodies was published by Jane Mattingly in 2025. Black Woman Grief is an interview with Natasha Smith, published in 2025 as well. Crooklyn, directed by Spike Lee, was released in 1994. And finally, we have Dying While Black, Links Between Mental Health, Chronic Stress, and Death by Ashley McGirth. In this TED Talk, Ashley McGirth does a good job of painting a picture of the experiences of those with, Black identity who are subjugated to various forms of violence that lead us down roads to death that are traumatic and often premature. And she displays this visual during her talk that is a pyramid of death. And this really resonated with me because it shows the different things one can experience from conception that can lead to an early or premature death that we are seeing happen repeatedly in our communities. I wanted to share this pyramid just so there's a really clear idea of the grief that I am communicating. All of these events have their own grieving process that people go through once they experience them and throughout life. And ultimately, seeing people pass away from or be impacted by these experiences as a result of a shared identity also leads to its own grieving process. So that's the first thing I wanted to share. This is the earlier published paper that I referenced previously in the video. And again, I wanted to show how they define this cumulative stress that we experience that leads to decreased lifespans, as shown by their findings, which, if you read research papers, every paper has its limitations and its ways it can be expanded upon. But I really want individuals to read what is listed here as the stressors, and again, just really come to an understanding of how much loss we experience, not just from the lives that we've built and having different things taken away, but also whenever we think about the lives that we could be living outside of discrimination, outside of racism, that is another element of grief that is confounding on our lives. I also want to do a quick shout out for this paper, which was published in Social Science and Medicine, just to highlight the fact that there are various studies that have been done that show that people that are in proximity to violence also have different effects from that and are affected by that. And there are a variety of studies that show that. So I want to clarify, even if you feel like you are not directly impacted by these things and you're wondering why you still feel this heaviness as like a result of seeing them or being in proximity to them, you are valid in that. And you do need to experience your own, coming to terms with what you are being exposed to. As well as Black women grief really highlight on the idea of collectively sharing our grieving stories and really putting words to the experiences that we are having as a group and in community, because that also is a benefit during our grieving processes. This part is about to be a spoiler. If you've never seen Crooklyn, it is free on Tubi right now, so give it a watch if you've never seen it. But anyways, this movie is on this list because I really was fascinated by the way that Spike Lee put the mother's passing in the third act of this movie. And I'm saying Spike Lee, but there is a different screenwriter whose name is escaping me currently, who wrote the movie based on, her own upbringing and her own relationship with her mother, who passed away when she was young. And when I was rewatching this film, I did not remember what the plot was for real. I watched it for the first time as a kid. The most I remembered was the dog getting stuck in the couch and popping out, to be honest. But in rewatching it, I have realized that it can be such an interesting way to perceive grief and perceive loss in Black communities, because we see so much of what life is beforehand, then we see the passing, and then we get a glimpse into what it looks like afterwards. And I think it gives such an interesting perspective to how, death is a part of our everyday lives, because we don't see a big funeral or grieving process or anything. We just see life keep on moving. And I don't think necessarily that is meant to be the takeaway of the movie, but I think because I was doing this work anyways, that is what I took away. And there's a whole lot of things that could be unpacked from that movie, but that is what I will leave it at for now. This paper is so heavy and elucidating and profound, to be so honest. And not because of the people who constructed and put this paper together, but because of the quotes that we have in here from individuals who were experiencing torment and psychological warfare at the hands of their oppressors. And I'm talking about enslaved people. This article shows how much the ability to grieve has not even been a right that we've been afforded. It was literally illegal to hold certain funeral rites for enslaved people. And I want to highlight this paper because a lot of the ways that we reconcile with what we see in the world are controlled. And our ability to process what we've seen in a way that is healthy has been so hindered throughout history, and we're still seeing it. And
The element of psychological warfare that has been used in brutalizing Black bodies and displaying it is something that runs so deep and holds us in these spirits of fear, and that is on purpose. So I really want every single Black person to read this article, every person who is experiencing violence or seeing their communities brutalized. I would love for every person to read this article because it is so powerful. And I could talk about it forever, but I'm just going to highlight two main quotes. The first from Booker T. Washington. He states, "The trouble with us is that we are always preparing to die." And he's referring to, Black people, Negroes. And the reason why I want to highlight this is because, like I said, seeing our deaths like this, seeing the way people die in such violent ways, it's on purpose. And I really want people to know that there is a way to move through that fear and no longer be held captive by it. And once we can do that as a collective, I think we can move forward so far, because a lot of things that we do and perpetuate are in our own communities are as a result of fear. And in the same way, silence is not a safety mechanism for real. It gives a false sense of security. Fear also will give you a false sense of security. So that's the first quote. The second quotation I want to share is from W.E.B. Du Bois, and he stated, "Of death the Negro showed but little fear, but talked of it familiarly, and even fondly as simply a crossing of waters, perhaps, who knows, back to his ancient forests again." And throughout this paper, it also has a segment speaking to the spirituality that is intertwined with the grieving process of the people it was highlighting. And in it, a lot of the individuals who spoke of death and dying really considered death to be a homegoing, as we know has been passed down and is the same idea that we have. And it gave them almost a comfort in understanding, their experiences of life and death in that moment. And I think that, and when I say homegoing, I'm not just referring to heaven. I'm referring to, like, there are individuals who imagined they would return home to their land, to their foreland, to, Africa. You feel me? Anyways, I say this to say, I think developing a comfort in our lives and in our deaths, and fighting to the right to have lives and deaths that are well and that are spiritually well and also physically well, will be very transformative for our community.
I am realizing that this is probably the heaviest topic I have ever talked about on camera, period, and perhaps in person, to be so honest, because these conversations are not always being had in this way. And, I just want to say, before we get into the next part of the video, take some time to sit with the moment that you're in. A lot of information has been unpacked, and I'm sure a lot of feelings and emotions have been unpacked for whoever is on the other side of this video. So, don't just sit with this topic without taking necessary steps to prioritize your own well-being. That being said, let's talk about some takeaways, translations, and threads. My first takeaway that I have that is forefront on my mind is that I want a better relationship with life and death, to be honest. And I feel like I want to be able to imagine myself at peace throughout this life. And the only reason I personally am going to be able to do that is in knowing that the people around me and in this world, that I'm doing something to help mitigate and end suffering. Which is starting with, understanding the grieving process for me, which is my second takeaway. I feel like I've been really trying to wrap my head around what can I do, what presence can I have, how can I contribute to the atrocity, to, really tackling the atrocities that are going on in this world. And I wanted to dive headfirst into doing stuff, but I think I've been led to first start with understanding grief and understanding how I'm going to enter spaces where, people are experiencing trauma, where I'm experiencing hardship, and, seeing these stories and really wanting to remain in my emotions and not be desensitized or detached. So I think my first step has been in understanding grief and how it applies broadly beyond the scope of how we typically think about it, which is in the passing of someone. So I say that to say, I really want to just reach a point of acceptance with this world and reconciling with what it is, which it's crazy. It's crazy and it's a lot. So that's my other takeaway. My other takeaway is this idea of lament and expressing how I feel and not bottling up sorrow or running from pain, and allowing myself to sit with it and let it take its course, and also sharing with others, because I feel like in reading And Die in Dixie, the essay, reading the words that were shared on how enslaved people handled their grief and handled, funerals, rites, and things like that, just made me realize how deeply spiritual it is to be in connection with people while you are going through something so hard and so traumatizing. These are my translations. I want to consider the ways that I can show up for my community as we come to terms with the hands we've been dealt and what it looks like in our lives. I really, really, really want everyone to have the right to live and die well in this world. And I know that will require a lot of action, a lot of planning, some foresight. So I'm excited to see where my work leads me in the future. Number 2, how can I support caregivers in our community? Because they are very much overlooked and undersupported outside of their families. Because like I said, oftentimes we take care of people within our family unit, and that leaves us without as many resources. And I'm not just saying resources healthcare wise, I'm saying people need to pay to get their hair done sometimes. People need to have assistance in tutoring their kids when they're taking care of their grandma. I don't know, these are the examples that I have, but you know what I'm saying. I just really, really, really am passionate about the caregiver experience and how we can build strong caregiving communities, especially in a world where our healthcare systems are very much failing us. Okay, this is my thread for this video. How can I honor the land my ancestors came from and fought to remain connected with while maintaining my own relationship with God? And that's a really personal thread perhaps, but And Die in Dixie was one of the craziest things that I've read. And I say crazy, and it was one of the most impactful things that I've read to start this year. And it leaves you with so many questions and so many ideas around your connection to God and spirituality. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I want to end off a little different today because as I was making this video, I realized I have done so many moments of silence in school for tragedies that have happened to so many groups of people, for example, 9/11 and things like that. But I don't think anytime I've been taught Black history or taught about the histories of enslaved people, of the Jim Crow South, of Reconstruction, all that, where we read about all these heavy deaths, I have never once been in a classroom where we were offered the space to have a moment of silence to honor those people, to honor my ancestors, to honor the people that have experienced so much violence in this country. I realized that as I was cooking, and I was like, wait a second, that's actually crazy. They had us learning about our histories, unpacking all this traumatizing information, coming face to face with our identities and our histories, and never really offered a space to grieve these things we were learning. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something away. But I really want to end this off on just a moment of silence, a moment of prayer, a moment of thoughtfulness. So I'm not going to show myself doing that. I will put something cutesy up, maybe some soft music. Nope, it's supposed to be silent. I will put up a photo, and I invite you to have a moment of silence and reflection. Thanks.